Thanks, John. And I do want to acknowledge the role of the Idaho Water Resources Research Institute in helping to procure the funding from NASA. I want to recognize NASA for the funding. I want to recognize Idaho Water Engineering, particularly Dave Tuthill and Hal Anderson for helping to organize this whole workshop. Dave's been a real key advocate of this technology, dating from his days as director of the Idaho Department of Water Resources and now in the private sector. A few more things before I turn it over to Dave for closing. One, I don't want to embarrass her, but Jama Hamill's sitting back here. Raise your hand in the purple. Jama operates the Agromet system. It's an agricultural meteorological network in the Pacific Northwest. Has how many stations? 72 stations. And as you saw, Metric is based on and actually is calibrated using reference ET. And when we go looking for reference ET, we look for the best stations we can find, and they're invariably the Agromet stations here in Idaho. Because and I should mention James with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation out of the Pacific Northwest Center here in Boise. USBR has been a long-term sponsor and manager of this Agromet system for gratis. The data are free, they're on the web. Excellent QA/QC program, just high integrity data, and that means everything to Metric, because if you don't have a solid, accurate reference ET basis, then you aren't going to be able to do much with that imagery, no matter how good the imagery is, because as you know, Landsat's a snapshot. So when we process Seaball or Metric or other methods, we're still getting a ET for that instant. Well, what do you do with the intervening period? Well, that is based generally upon ground data, weather data, windy days, calm days, sunny days, cloudy days. It's the ground data that takes that into consideration. So it's a huge part of Metric, and I just want to acknowledge, again, another federal government agency's role in supporting this whole technology. And speaking of reference ET, if we continue this workshop next year, we're thinking about maybe as a theme, this year's theme was a little bit on the legal applications. I think that maybe next year, at least a sub-theme might be gridded reference evapotranspiration. You've heard some people mention, there's a lot of effort to estimate reference ET from some of the WARF or NAR, North American Reanalysis data, NLDAS, GLDAS. There's all these gridded data sets out there. They have some challenges, with seeing the conditioning effect of irrigation, but people are working on that also. Anyway, I think that'd be a nice theme with invited presentations, just to see where we are as far as state of the art of that a year from now, and then maybe expose more people into just how do you find that type of information, how should you best handle it, interpret it, and make the most value out of it. So welcome your feedback on that as an idea. Jim Irons, you're still here. You haven't left yet. You've seen this report that Tom Loveland handed out on the comparison of represented Landsat. Is it okay to talk about it?
It is. Yes, it is.
Oh.
I believe she blessed it.
Releasable. Okay. This is hot off the press, and when we send the email out, if we can find a PDF and put it on the website, I'll do so. I've got 2 copies, so I'll give one away if somebody wants one. But I want to bring this to your attention. It's October 12. It's a USGS and NASA co-sponsored document. It summarizes a study conducted earlier this year. You've heard people talk about this RFI activity that went on. The first half of 2012 requests for information on what to do about Landsat 8, Landsat 9, what should it look like? Can it be cheaper? Should it be a private sector bill? Should it be small sat? All that. Well, the way to help judge whether or not some of the information provided by industry and even some federal entities on whether or not what they were proposing fit the requirements of what Landsat needs to provide. NASA and USGS conducted a survey of some of the primary uses of Landsat information, all the way from agriculture to forestry to geology to water management. Evapotranspiration is one of those entries. And they were asked, okay, what should the Landsat product look like to fulfill your needs? And, how many bands? What bands do you have to have? What bands would you welcome? What's pixel size do you have to have minimum? What would you welcome? What new bands might you desire? What kind of return time, especially important? And so the water community had an opportunity to indicate that we would welcome a 4-day revisit time. What's quite important to note is that 2 or 3 other uses, including fire and let's see, fire and forest, disease control, hurricane mitigation, those all also had 4-day return time. I want to call that to your attention because as you write letters to your delegation and such, you can refer to this and say, you know, this 4-day return time is just not coming out of a hat. It's not just coming from us, but there are other important users of Landsat that are also requesting 4-day return time, and it's in a federal document. That's important also. So I want to call this to your attention so you can make use of it, and we'll direct you to this. The last thing I'd like to acknowledge Tim Petty, the fact that you've stuck around for 2 days with us, Tim, and again to reintroduce Tim. Tim is a staff member of Senator Risch of Idaho. He's stationed in Washington, is in charge of the water topics and other topics. And Tim, I wanted to just ask you if what we're kind of suggesting about the type of information to supply to delegates and how to approach them, if that sounds reasonable, and if you have any extra recommendations you'd like to share. Don't want to put you on the spot.
No, well, I've really appreciated just being here and interacting with everybody here. I've learned quite a bit. Yeah, great. I've learned quite a bit on just the incredible use. I was familiar with it. Obviously, a number of the University of Idaho people have come to visit Senator Risch and some of the others. But I think what Tony was saying is really critical for you being able to really explain to the staff. And one of the parts that I couldn't agree more with Tony and his discussion is that there really is a huge turnover that's really occurring. There's a lot of members who are retiring. There's a lot of members who are moving to other areas of responsibility in committee assignments, which is crucial to a lot of the work that you're dealing with because it's detailed. And when that starts to happen, you have to take an extra effort to really engage the staff and the members on the details of the, of the critical nature of what we're talking about here. And as Rick was just explaining, these different areas, the use of fire, the use of drought, the use of agriculture, all of these areas come into important critical times. And as Tony was saying, at times when there's a crisis, there's nothing better to step forward and demonstrate solutions. And when even the ET community steps forward and then being able to show different points of illustration, it just literally highlights areas where the members and the staff say, okay, I've heard this 5 times, I still don't have any idea what it does, but I need to know now what it is that you're talking about. And at that point, it's those introductions, it's that business card that still sits somewhere on a staff's desk that says, I need to call and I need to talk to Rick, I need to talk to Tony, I need to talk to someone who can really explain this to me so that we can get solutions and discussions started. And those are the times where you've already built the relationship, you've met in those offices at several times, and those are important. Even if it's 5 or 10 minutes, I'll literally have 8 or 9 meetings a day sometimes when my senator has different things going on. And in those 5 or 10 minutes, I remember the name, I remember the issue, but a lot of times I can't remember the details. It's those details that are crucial. For me to be here with all of you for these 2 days, and I'm going to try to attend before I fly out tomorrow, even the session of some of the details. Those are important for me to have a better understanding of the details so that when it comes time for me and the senator calls me in and says, what is it that we can do? I can say, I know 3 or 4 people that I can bring in that can really give the details of what this issue is. And the ones that's not been discussed that'll be a critical one too as well with Landsat is ocean, coastal areas, areas dealing with watersheds, areas that's dealing with conservation easements. These are also areas that are a lot of discussion that comes into play that I think just sitting here and watching the different discussions that I think are critical areas to really be looking at because people are very interested in those areas as well. And there's a lot of money and effort being put to those. So when there's a momentum, you got to step in and say, oh, this is a set that we need to be looking at, and there can be funding in there. There can be research funding. There can be other areas that have become really practical. And I guess the last point that I want to make that I think is critical is keep inviting businesses to show what they're doing. Several of the different companies that were here, I think were fabulous because it's not just theoretical. It's not a bunch of university professors or scientists somewhere in a glass bubble. You guys are demonstrating that you're getting it out and that it's very, very practical to businesses because it's the businesses that create the constituents, and the constituents is what the senator and congressman are really looking at in those areas of how we can continue to serve them better. I'll stop there.
Very good, Tim. Thanks much. You know, I should mention too, besides Agromet, there are other good agricultural ET, weather ET networks around. Justin Huntington mentioned the NICENet that's up in Nevada now. There's the High Plains Network. We continue to encourage all these networks to exercise the best QA/QC they can, and you know, you as users, you know, give positive feedback to these networks as you use their data and encourage them to entertain good QA/QC procedures. There's more and more tools available, including the 2005 ASCE standardization of ET has some protocol in it for fairly quick assessment of data quality, and then how to perhaps fix it. How many of you, just a quick show of hands, figure within the next few years you'll be using a Landsat image one way or another? All right, good. Thank you. Well, I'm going to quit now. You know, I just want to say to show that I am human. I don't cry very often, but when I think about tears on Landsat 8 and some of the sacrifices that people have made and the fact that we got it done, that does bring tears to my eyes. That was a fantastic feat, and I'm sure people in the future, you know, we are representing, we're a small group, but we're representing probably 100 million people in our states and, you know, people that we provide water consumption products for. So we're representing a bunch of people, and I know that, well, they'll never know explicitly that there's even a Landsat, maybe many of them, but they're going to know that there's a lot going on with water management, water transfers, and that's based upon this satellite technology. So one way or another, I think they're going to have some kind of appreciation for the work that we hope to do to support future Landsat, and the fact that there's tiers on Landsat 8. So please expect some communication from us. Expect that somewhere, somehow, you're going to see some indication of activity back in D.C. In some of the congressional committees, at NASA, with USGS Reston. If you hear about any of that, do not wait to be invited to weigh in on it. If you see an opportunity, it's for your own interest. If you're going to be a user of Landsat, protect your future. And don't wait for us to notify you. There may be stuff that misses us. So please take advantage. Anything you hear about opportunity-wise to weigh in, to communicate to congressional people, please let us know, because we want to help organize the Senate and the representatives amongst the various states so that they're able to communicate with each other and express their support to one another, so that they know that there's a large core of advocacy for Landsat. So anyway, please become a little bit active, if you will. So with that, I guess we could take just a few minutes to open up the floor to anybody that would like to make a comment, either to the panelists here or just to this workshop in general, or any kind of announcement. Tim Martin looks like would like to. Here's a mic coming across, Tim.
Yeah, so I can talk loud.
That's good to use the mic.
Yeah, I just wanted to raise a point that's occurred to me off and on today, and that is about, when we're talking about the continuity and the follow-on missions and support for that, is just to broaden the horizon just a little bit, back to some discussions we had yesterday about international applications. I realize, the focus of this meeting is Western states, but as I said yesterday, I mean, the data that's free is free to everybody in the world. It's not just free to people in the United States. And, that's a real strong, I think there's a real strong case to be added to why we need these data here for, globally. Because, as I said, the applications that we're working on, the technologies that we're developing, largely from folks in this room, are wanted and needed and applied in many other situations in the world. So to the argument of the long term, I mean, there's economic benefits to the United States of consultants and scientists and researchers, spreading the technology and using it elsewhere. There's projects, there's money from the World Bank and from other governments. We've got a project right now with another government where they're paying us, Americans, to do this work and to train their people to do this work. So that's a little bit of a subtle point, but I think it's one we probably should incorporate in our arguments, the more global aspect of it. And not only that, but just the humanitarian side. There's, a lot of these applications are much more basic than what we're using here, where people are looking at there's water security in international situations where, potable water supplies and a lot of the kind of conflicts or optimization issues that we have here are really basic, where people are, dependent on a diminished water supply. So I think we can make the humanitarian interest argument, the economic argument for resources coming back to the states, spread of American technology and U.S. Research, et cetera. And, I'm curious as well, maybe, Tim, to see if you think that would resonate, if it's framed up in the arguments that we make, that it is a global resource and it impacts us economically, but also our national security and our interest in economic development internationally. So that's kind of a statement and kind of a question, I guess. I'd be curious what you think.
Thanks, Tim.
Water intensive. just in time. So the answer would be yes. Internationally, I know there was a presentation on Morocco. And actually, excuse me, when I was at Interior, I went with USAID and the State Department to Morocco and to Libya in 2007, specifically on water. And yes, and so those were specific communication and interaction that takes place.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Anyone else? Comment or? Yes, Molly?
I just wanted to thank John Tracy for bringing up the water use program. And the water use program, in the last 2 compilations, the national compilation dropped consumptive use from irrigation category because we could not consistently estimate that number and defend it. And at that time, that was about the first time I learned about metric and with Dr. Allen's work. And on several occasions mentioned that to, at that time, the chief of the Office of Groundwater in the USGS. And I think that was one of the first exposures that USGS started to have to see that there were these tools out there that could help us answer this question. And it's taken a while. And, part of what Gabriel talked about yesterday is going to be applied in the 2010 compilation. If we can, get it together in time, and we're working on it. But the USGS has decided, and the water use program has chosen to use this methodology. Now, granted, MODIS works for us because we're working at a county level or a HUC level. And I'd like to know what the estimate would be to do the country using Landsat. Because I about fell out of my chair when I heard how much it costs just to do the Snake River Plain. So anyway, I just wanted to say that the survey is embracing this. It is being funded under the Water Census Initiative. And I hope that there will be, and there is and will be, more Landsat applications in the focus area studies. And then just to reiterate that I said before, the western states are leading the charge, but the country needs this. USGS needs this to do a lot of different studies in a lot of different places. And so your support and your advocates should come from everywhere. So,
Okay, thank you, Molly. All right, well, let's conclude this session and ask Dave Tuthill to come up and wind up the workshop. Thanks. Thank you, panel.